The night he said he needed freedom still rings in my ears like a broken bell. We had just finished dinner, our usual boiled potatoes and chicken soup, when he placed his spoon down slowly, his hands trembling a bit more than usual. His eyes, once so warm and kind, looked cold, distant, almost like a stranger was staring back at me. "Margaret," he said, his voice shaking. "I need freedom." For a moment, I thought he meant freedom from the aches in his back or the medicine he had to take every morning. I smiled and said softly, "Freedom from what, darling?" But then he stood up. His chair scraped against the tiled floor with a sharp sound that made my heart jump. He looked down at me and said words that froze the air between us. "Freedom from you. I can't do this anymore. I'm 80, not dead. I want to live before I die." I felt my breath catch. I stared at him, hoping he would laugh and say he was joking, but he didn't. He turned, walked into the bedroom, and came out with his old brown suitcase. That same suitcase he took with him when we went on our honeymoon 55 years ago. He didn't even look back. The sound of the front door closing behind him was like the world ending in slow motion. My heart felt like it had been torn in half. I wanted to run after him, but my legs felt too weak. I sat there in the quiet, staring at his half-empty plate, wondering how a man could suddenly decide that the woman he shared a lifetime with was a cage he needed to escape. I whispered to myself, "Freedom? From love." And the tears came before I could stop them. That was the night my heart broke. But what happened after that, what happened next, changed everything. 55 years ago, I was a young woman full of laughter, hope and dreams. My name is Margaret, and I was just 25 when I met Thomas. He was tall, charming, and had a way of smiling that made you feel like the sun was shining just for you. We met at a church picnic on a summer afternoon. He offered me a slice of pie and said, "You have the kindest eyes I've ever seen." Back then life was simple. He worked as a carpenter, and I was a schoolteacher. We had little, but we had each other. And that was enough. We built our small house together, board by board, painting the walls with laughter and promises. I used to hum while he hammered nails into the walls. We didn't have much money, but we made do. We had 3 children, David, Sarah, and little Emily. They filled our home with joy and noise. Thomas was a wonderful father. He'd make wooden toys for them, and tell bedtime stories that made us all laugh until our stomachs hurt. For years, I believed we were the perfect couple. We grew old side by side, watching our children grow, marry, and have kids of their own. I thought that's how it would always be, me and Thomas, together till the end. But as the years passed, I began to notice small cracks in our love. He became quieter, spent more time sitting outside staring at the horizon. I'd ask him what he was thinking about, and he'd shrug and say, "Nothing." But I could feel it, something had changed. When our youngest, Emily, moved abroad, the house became too quiet. I tried to fill it with knitting, cooking, and talking to neighbors, but the silence grew heavier each day. I thought maybe it was just age. Maybe we were both tired. But I never imagined he was growing tired of me. One evening, I found him looking through old photo albums. He stared at the picture of his younger self in his military uniform. "Look at that," he said softly. "I used to be someone." "You still are," I told him, smiling. But he didn't smile back. He just sighed and turned the page. Then came the day when he started going for long walks, alone. He said he needed air, but sometimes he'd be gone for hours. When I asked where he went, he'd just say, "Nowhere." I began to worry, but I didn't want to sound controlling. I told myself he's 80. Let him breathe. But little did I know, he wasn't just taking walks. He was spending time with someone. Her name was Clara. A widow from the next street, 72, cheerful, and full of energy. She moved into our neighborhood 2 years ago. I used to bake cookies and bring them to her when she first arrived. I thought we were friends. I had no idea that while I was busy knitting baby socks for our grandkids, my husband was sitting in her garden, drinking tea and laughing the way he used to laugh with me. I found out by accident. One afternoon, I decided to surprise him with his favorite pie. I walked to the park where he usually went for his walks. I saw him there, under the big oak tree. But he wasn't alone. He was holding Clara's hand. They were smiling, whispering like teenagers. I froze. I wanted to scream, to run. but my body refused to move. I turned away, tears blurring my vision, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. That evening, I didn't say a word. I waited for him to come home. He did, pretending nothing had happened. He kissed my cheek and said, "Dinner smells nice." I wanted to throw the pot at him, but I couldn't. I just nodded, pretending to. For weeks, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was harmless, just old people needing company. But deep down I knew. I could feel him slipping away from me, one silent day at a time. Then that dinner came. The night he said the words that shattered my world. "I need freedom." When he left, I sat alone in the dark, my hands trembling. I could hear the ticking of the clock, each tick reminding me that I was alone now. Écrit till morning. I thought about calling the children, but I didn't want them to see me broken. I was supposed to be strong, the mother, the grandmother. But that night, I felt smaller than ever. The next morning, I went outside to check the mail. There was a letter from him. The handwriting was shaky. My heart raced as I tore it open. "Margaret," it read, "please don't look for me. I need time to find myself. I'll always care for you. But I can't live the rest of my days feeling trapped. I want to feel alive again." The paper slipped from my fingers. I sank to my knees on the porch. The neighbors must have heard me sobbing, but I didn't care. He was gone. After 55 years, the man I thought would hold my hand till the end had chosen to chase freedom. But here's what no one knew. What happened after that letter would uncover secrets I never imagined. And a truth that would turn everything upside down. The next day, as I sat alone in our living room surrounded by memories, I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to go find him. I woke up the next morning with puffy eyes and a heavy heart, but something inside me had shifted. The quietness in the house was too loud, too painful. I looked around at the pictures on the wall, our wedding photo, the kids' baby pictures, and one from our 50th anniversary when Thomas had kissed my cheek and whispered, "We made it, Maggie." Now he was gone, chasing something he called freedom. I brewed a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, and unfolded the letter again. His words stung just as hard as the first time I read them. I need to find myself. I can't live feeling trapped. Trapped? After everything we'd built together? For the first time in my life, anger began to push through the sorrow. I wasn't going to sit there and let him walk out of my life like I was some old furniture he didn't need anymore. I wanted answers. I wanted to look him in the eyes and hear him say why. So, I decided to find him. I put on my cardigan, grabbed my purse, and took my walking stick. The world outside looked the same. Children riding bicycles, the mailman whistling, but to me, everything felt different. My heart was broken, yet my spirit burned with determination. I started by visiting Clara's house. She lived 2 streets away, in a small yellow cottage with pink flowers in front. I had been there once, years ago, when I brought her cookies. I remember how she said, "You and your husband are the sweetest couple. 55 years together. I can't imagine." Now I couldn't imagine her with him. When I got there, I saw her outside watering her flowers. She smiled when she saw me, but her smile faded when she noticed the look on my face. "Margaret," she said nervously. "Good morning." "Morning," I replied, my voice shaking slightly. "Have you seen Thomas?" Her eyes darted away. "Thomas? Oh, not today. Why do you ask?" "Don't play games, Clara," I said. "I saw you 2 together at the park." Her face turned red. She put down her watering can and sighed. "Margaret, please, he's confused. He just needed someone to talk to." "To talk to," I repeated bitterly. "You mean someone to run away with?" She shook her head quickly. "It's not like that. He told me he felt invisible at home, that you stopped listening." My heart stung at her words. Invisible? I spent my life caring for him, cooking his meals, folding his clothes, and watching over him when he fell sick. How could he say that? "I never stopped listening," I whispered. He stopped talking. Clara looked down, guilt flickering in her eyes. "He's staying at his cousin's old cabin near the lake," she said quietly. "He told me he needed time to think. That's all I know." I turned to leave. My hands were trembling, but I forced myself to keep my head high. "Thank you," I said coldly. You've done enough. As I walked away, I felt my knees shaking, but my heart was set. I was going to that cabin. The lake was about an hour away by bus. I sat by the window, holding my handbag tightly, watching the fields and old barns pass by. I remembered the last time Thomas and I went there together, for our 30th anniversary. We fed ducks and laughed like teenagers. He had promised me that no matter how old we grew, he would never stop loving me. Tears filled my eyes again. What changed? When I arrived at the small village near the lake, I asked a shopkeeper where the old Harris cabin was. She pointed me down a narrow dirt path lined with pine trees. Hasn't been used much lately, she said. But I saw an old man walking that way 2 days ago. That gave me hope. I walked slowly, the crunch of dry leaves under my feet. My heart was pounding, not just from the walk but from fear. Fear of what I might find. When I reached the cabin, I saw smoke rising from the chimney. He was there. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door. For a long moment, there was silence. Then the door creaked open, and there he was. Thomas. He looked thinner, tired, but alive. His eyes widened when he saw me. Margaret. Hello, Thomas, I said softly. He opened the door wider but didn't smile. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same, I said, stepping inside. The place was dusty but warm. A single chair, an old table, a half-empty cup of tea. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. I told you not to come. You told me you needed freedom, I said, my voice breaking. But freedom from what, Thomas? From me? From our life? From love? He didn't answer. He sat down heavily and looked at the floor. Margaret, I don't know who I am anymore. I wake up and feel like I've wasted my life. Every day feels the same. The house, the routine. I can't breathe there anymore. I stared at him, shocked. You think I can breathe without you? He looked at me, his eyes full of pain. You don't understand. I'm scared. I'm scared of dying without ever feeling alive again. That broke me. After all our years together, after raising children, surviving losses, celebrating joys, he wanted more. Something I apparently couldn't give. I turned away to hide my tears. Do you think running away will make you young again? He didn't reply. Silence filled the room like thick fog. I looked around at the cabin, the same one we had visited years ago. My heart ached at the memory. Finally, I said, if you need space, take it. But don't you dare throw away 55 years like it was nothing. He looked up at me, guilt in his eyes. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. I whispered. You broke my heart. I turned to leave. My legs felt weak, but I managed to walk out the door. As I stepped into the cool evening air, I could hear him calling my name, but I didn't turn back. I walked toward the bus stop, my eyes filled with tears. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to beg anyone to love me, not even the man I built my life with. That night, I returned home to an empty house. I thought that would be the end of it, that he'd stay at the cabin until he got bored. But I was wrong, because the next morning, there was a knock at my door, not from Thomas, but from the police. Mrs. Margaret Harris? The officer asked gently. Yes, I said, my voice trembling. He took off his hat, his eyes full of sympathy. There's been an accident at the lake. The room began to spin. My heart dropped. What kind of accident? I whispered. The officer hesitated, then said quietly, It's your husband, ma'am. He's been found unconscious near the water. I gasped, clutching my chest as my knees gave way. The world went black around me. When I opened my eyes, everything was blurry. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant, and a soft humming sound came from the ceiling fan above me. My head felt heavy, and for a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The knock at the door, the policeman's face, his words. Thomas. The lake. The accident. I gasped and tried to sit up. A nurse rushed to my side. Easy, ma'am, she said gently, pressing my shoulder down. You fainted. You're at the hospital now. My husband, I croaked. Where's my husband? The nurse's face softened. He's here. The doctors are still checking on him. He's stable for now. I let out a shaky breath, relief washing through me. Can I see him? Soon, she said kindly. But you should rest first. You've been through a shock. Rest. How could I rest when my husband, the man who left me for freedom, was lying somewhere between life and death? I closed my eyes, and tears slid down my cheeks. The memories of our years together flooded back like a movie I didn't want to watch. Our first home. Our first child. Our first fight. All those nights when I lay beside him, thinking our love was forever. And now this. After a while, the nurse came back. You can see him now, she said softly. My legs trembled as I followed her down the long corridor. Every step echoed through the hallway, the sound bouncing off the white walls like whispers. We stopped at room 214. When I entered, I froze. Thomas was lying on the bed, pale and fragile, with tubes connected to his arms. His breathing was shallow, his eyes closed. For a moment, I thought he might not wake up, and my heart clenched painfully. I sat beside him and took his cold hand in mine. Thomas, I whispered, what have you done? He stirred a little, his lips parting. And Margaret? I'm here, I said quickly, squeezing his hand. I'm right here. He opened his eyes weakly. I didn't mean for this to happen. What happened? I asked softly, brushing a tear from his cheek. He swallowed hard. I went to the lake, to think. I was sitting by the water when Clara came. She wanted to talk. I told her I needed to be alone, but she kept insisting. We argued. I got dizzy, and I must have slipped. Clara was there? I asked, my heart pounding. He nodded slowly. She tried to help me, but I don't remember much after that. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm in my chest. He looked so weak, so broken, not the strong man I once knew. You could have died, I whispered. I know, he said, tears welling in his eyes. And all I could think about was you. That sentence pierced my heart like a blade. After all the hurt, all the betrayal, in his final moment of fear, he thought of me. Thomas, I said softly, you walked out on me. You said you needed freedom. But freedom from love doesn't exist. You can't find peace by running away from the people who love you. He looked ashamed. I was foolish. I thought I'd feel alive if I started over. But when I was lying there, half drowned, I realized I'd left the only person who ever truly cared for me. I looked at him silently. I wanted to forgive him, but my heart wasn't ready yet. A doctor entered, breaking the silence. Mrs. Harris, your husband is stable, but he'll need rest. You should let him sleep. I nodded and stood up slowly. As I turned to leave, Thomas whispered, don't go too far. I stopped and looked back at him. I never did, I said quietly, even when you did. Over the next few days, I stayed by his side. I brought him soup, helped him sit up, and even brushed his thinning hair. The nurses called us the old lovebirds, but they didn't know the truth. That love, in our case, was cracked and bleeding. Clara came once. She stood at the door, holding a bouquet of flowers. When she saw me sitting beside his bed, she froze. Margaret, she said softly. I just wanted to check on him. I looked at her calmly. He's fine. You can leave the flowers. She nodded and placed them on the table. I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling. I never meant to come between you two. I was lonely too. For a second, I saw something in her eyes, guilt mixed with sadness. She wasn't a villain, just another old soul scared of being forgotten. Go home, Clara, I said gently. He doesn't need company anymore. He has me. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and quietly walked away. After she left, Thomas turned to me. You didn't have to be kind to her. I didn't do it for her, I said. I did it for myself. Anger can eat you alive, Thomas. I don't want to live my last years bitter. He reached for my hand. Can you ever forgive me? I looked at him. Really looked. The wrinkles, the tired eyes, the man I'd known for a lifetime. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I'll stay. That's all I can promise. He smiled faintly, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a glimmer of the man I fell in love with. Weeks passed and he grew stronger. The doctors finally said he could go home. I packed his things and waited by the car while they wheeled him out. He looked fragile, but he smiled when he saw me. I never thought I'd see this house again, he said quietly as we arrived home. Neither did I replied. That night, after dinner, we sat together in silence. The clock ticked softly, just like it did on the night he left. But this time, he reached out and held my hand. I don't deserve you, he said. Maybe not, I said, smiling faintly. But you're stuck with me anyway. He chuckled, the sound weak but genuine. For a moment, it felt like the old days, peaceful and warm. But just as I began to think things might finally heal, something unexpected happened. The phone rang. I got up and answered it. Hello. A woman's voice came through the line, shaky, nervous. Is this Mrs. Harris? Yes, who's speaking? There was a pause. Then the voice said, My name is Grace. I think I'm your husband's daughter. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. What did you say? I whispered, my heart racing. I'm sorry, the voice said softly. Thomas never told you about me. The room began to spin. My knees went weak, and I gripped the edge of the table. Who are you? I asked again, my voice trembling. I'm his daughter, she said. From before he met you. I froze, unable to speak. 55 years of marriage, and he had a secret child? The cup in my hand slipped and shattered on the floor. Thomas looked up from his chair, alarmed. Maggie, what's wrong? I turned to him, tears filling my eyes. You need to tell me the truth, I said. Right now. He frowned. What truth? The truth about Grace. His face went pale. And at that moment, I knew, this was just the beginning of a new storm. I sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors of gold and soft red. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine from the garden Thomas planted years ago. It was quiet, peaceful, but my heart was heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. After the call from Grace, my world once again turned upside down. I thought I had cried all the tears I could, but that day proved me wrong. When I confronted Thomas, his eyes told me the truth before his lips did. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. Yes, Margaret, he said quietly. Grace is my daughter. I made a mistake long before we met. I was young and foolish. Her mother left before I even knew she was born. I didn't find out until years later. I felt like the floor had vanished under my feet. All those decades of love, of trust, now shaken by one truth buried in the past. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. He bowed his head. Because I was ashamed. You loved me like I was perfect, and I didn't want to lose that. I wanted to scream at him, to throw every ounce of hurt in his face, but when I saw the tears in his eyes, something inside me softened. He wasn't the proud, strong man I'd married. He was just an old man full of regrets and fears, holding on to whatever time he had left. I turned away and went into the garden. The flowers swayed gently, as if whispering secrets to the wind. And in that moment, I realized something important. Life is too short to live in bitterness. Later that week, I met Grace. She came to the house, a woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. I'm sorry for disturbing your life, she said softly. I just wanted to know the man who gave me life before it's too late. She looked so much like Thomas that it almost hurt to look at her. I didn't know what to feel, anger, confusion, sorrow. But what I saw in her eyes wasn't pride or entitlement. It was longing. So, I did something that surprised even me. I invited her in. Thomas cried when he saw her. He held her hand like a father who had been waiting a lifetime for that moment. I never thought I'd see you, he whispered. It wasn't easy to watch, but something about that scene healed a part of me too. We had both carried wounds that time alone couldn't fix. Over the next few weeks, Grace became part of our lives. She helped me cook, brought laughter back into our quiet house, and reminded Thomas of the importance of family. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain. Thomas and I never fully went back to the way things were. Some cracks don't close. They just become part of the story. But we learned to live with them, to find love again, in a gentler, quieter way. One evening, months later, Thomas and I sat together on the same porch. He looked frail, his hands trembling slightly as he held mine. Maggie, he said softly, thank you for not giving up on me, for loving me even when I didn't deserve it. I smiled faintly. We all make mistakes, Thomas. Some big, some small. But love doesn't disappear. It changes shape. He nodded slowly, and his eyes glistened with tears. You were my home, Margaret. You still are. I leaned my head on his shoulder, and we watched the sun sink behind the trees. It was peaceful. The kind of peace that comes after a long, painful storm. A few weeks later, he passed away in his sleep, quietly, gently, with my hand in his. The morning light fell across his face, and he looked calm, like he'd finally found the freedom he'd been chasing. But this time, it wasn't freedom from me. It was freedom with peace. After the funeral, I sat by the lake where everything had fallen apart months before. The water was still, the reflection of the sky soft and golden. I smiled through my tears. He'd once said he needed freedom. In the end, I realized we both did. Freedom from the past, from regret, from pain. And somehow, forgiveness had given us that. Now, when my grandchildren visit, they often ask, Grandma, do you miss Grandpa? And I smile and say, every day. But love doesn't end when someone leaves. It just finds another way to stay. Then I tell them this story, not as a tale of heartbreak, but as a lesson. That even in old age, life can surprise you. That love isn't perfect, it's patient. And that forgiveness, no matter how late it comes, is the truest kind of freedom there is. I pick one of the flowers from the garden, close my eyes and whisper to the wind. You found your freedom, Thomas. And so did I. The wind carries my words across the lake, soft and steady. And for the first time in a long time, my heart feels light again.